Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And let me start with the current status, as you have mentioned correctly. In that, I think you can see my screen. Yeah. As Vijita at the beginning very well explained, actually we are now guided by the Sustainable Development Goals number 4. So there are vast range of actually targets we have to achieve during the period of from 2015 up to 30. So within that, and as well as even from the past, we have been guided with 3 main principles: the education system, strengthening equity, and the quality improvement, improving the quality of education, and also strengthening the management and the service delivery for those purposes. However, I would like to start my discussion, my presentation, giving some of these concerns, as most of the audience also might have, thinking of. Now, how we can discuss the school-based management models and school-based funding models, having these backgrounds as well in aside. So that is why I'm giving these concerns. The education system is decentralized according to the 13A, and also has several administrative structures. Between the national level and the school level, there are 6 layers governing for the governance purposes. And the school system is heterogeneous in terms of students' populations, levels of resources, and also from the geographical and socio-economic contextual factors. And also during the past, I think, several decades, we have experienced several reforms aimed at mitigation of inequalities and for improving the quality. However, yet, as we all know, there are gaps in terms of educational outcomes and performance of the schools. So therefore, any kind of change or an intervention to be brought about should be very well thought about and pertinently and coherently designed, and validity and sustainability assured, and also adequately resourced. So these are the concerns that I want to share at the beginning of my presentation. And then we will move to the school-based management concept, as it was mentioned earlier also. Caldwell's definition is somewhat a popular one that spells about the system. The SBM is identified as a systematic and consistent decentralization to the school level of autonomy and authority and responsibility to make decisions on significant matters. That means that the matters over what the schools can make decisions should be clearly defined at the beginning of the introduction of the model. And within a centrally determined framework of goals, policies, curriculum, standards, and accountabilities, that is to ensure the overall policies and the goals of a country. Because we cannot let the schools go by their own, but they can be given some empowerments, to a certain level, to a greater level even, but they also have to perform within the nationally determined policy framework. So that is the accepted idea of the current day. And the decentralization is supposed to be the management to be transparent, representative, and accountable, and participatory systems adopted. So these are the basics of introducing SBM, as well as for any other kinds of decentralized models for any of the sorts of organizations. So these are some of the research-based experiences. There are a lot of researches done around, elsewhere, especially by some of the multinational agencies like World Bank, and as well as, as Chayu also mentioned, in many countries like Latin American countries, Indonesia, New Zealand, Canada, they are the countries to introduce SBA models at the very early stage, decades. Researching over the prevailing available SBA models adopted by various countries, some researchers have identified, based on the degree of autonomy delegated, several models. I mean, they have categorized the models implemented by several different countries into 6 models, 5 models, from weaker to very strong. Weaker models, actually, they just have the power over school educational planning and certain global level decision making. But when it comes to very strong models, the parents or the community can even create a school. So this the power ranges between these continuum. And also another sets of research, like in other countries, I mean, studying the experiences of other countries, some researchers have identified different forms of the decision-making authorities. That is, how and who controls the decision-making processes. One model is identified is administrative control model, that is where the school principals are given more powers and more authorities. He or she can make most of the decisions of the school governance. And then the professional control model, where the teachers getting more powers in, especially, I mean, these kind of models like professional control models are more towards the quality. And community control models, rather than the principals and the school management, the community, the parents and the community members receive the power over making decisions. And then comes the balance control model, where the school principals, the school professionals, that means principals and the teachers, and the parents and the community members who are involved as well-wishers maybe, and even the students together make decisions. As a result of the implementation of various models of SBM, certain countries have been able to achieve certain goals or targets. Some countries have been able to ensure greater equity as a result of the SBA models. Increased access and progression, especially when these countries have faced with some crisis situations, the parents and the community were enabled to create schools, and then the governments have provided grants in some of the Latin American schools also. That has happened. And they have been able to gather children in those schools, because sometimes they have faced with huge floods and landslides, etc. So they have the schools were destroyed. So by those times, the governments have actually devolved the powers to the communities to start and run schools. And then the quality. Actually, most of the countries have implemented the balance control models of SBM for the purposes of improving the quality. These are actually supported with very welcoming learning environments, and they have witnessed with the developed professional learning communities, where the teachers work as a learning community, sometimes along with the schools in the neighborhood. And then the parents and community involvement is so high. And also they have witnessed with the students' learning outcomes improved. But however, the research shows, like TIMSS and PISA, the international studies also show that the evidence of the SBM models, SBM policies over student learning outcomes is mixed, because it takes some time. It has in some countries taken some 11, 12 years to produce different, changes in the results in terms of students' learning outcomes. And efficiency definitely increases with the SBM model in most of the countries that has witnessed. And because of the participatory planning and increased transparency and democratic decision making and the accountability, because the school principals become answerable. They are answerable to the community over the school functions and the decisions made, and also finally of the results of the students, I mean the outcomes, learning outcomes of the students. And increased community participation is definitely happen, and also the accountability and transparency, and also even in Sri Lanka, we have implemented the child-friendly schools initiative, with which I have also studied about this to a certain, deeper level. This has been able to adopt certain features of SBM, such as participation of parents in school development activities and resource generation for the primary schools especially. And these schools have actually shown that an increased inclusiveness and child-centeredness. So these are the characteristics and the results of the SBM. If I present them in a nutshell, studying in different countries, what has happening in different regions and countries. So then I would like to move to briefly elaborate on what is the experience of Sri Lanka in terms of SBM practices, as Dr. Tara Dimel also mentioned. Earlier in 1982, that was the first time for Sri Lanka to introduce some versions of school-based decision-making, with the introduction of the school development societies, where the parents have become, selected or elected parents have become members of the school decision-making body. And then in 1993, reportedly, school development boards were introduced, and however, because of the reasons that the small schools were not considered that much in a different way, and also because of certain schools have, started progressively raising funds, and certain other factors have actually impacted on inhibiting the implementation of the SDBs, school development boards. So that is not in implementation. That was not in, continued in its implementation, as we have, been, noticed. And then the next momentum is, as Chayu also mentioned, the formula-based funding mechanism introduced back in 2000, with very clear guidelines and circulars. That is, a formula-based funding mechanism considered the per pupil based allocation to each school. The grant is named as quality inputs. That was actually largely supported by the World Bank. By that time, the Ministry of Education has had a World Bank project. And it was not through the World Bank budgets, but actually the government budgets plus the World Bank budgets jointly supported the implementation of this NBUCRUM, that is called as NBUCRUM formulae, in order to, that enabled schools to purchase inputs and services. If a school is lacking with a teacher for a short-term period, like temporary basis, they can hire a teacher from the surrounding areas. They can pay out of the school budgets in accordance with the guidelines provided through this mechanism. And then child-friendly schools, as I mentioned, encouraged primary schools for participatory decision-making. And then an advanced version of the SBM, actually, as Dr. Tara Dimel also mentioned, some trials have been made by the Ministry of Education throughout the period of last 3 decades to introduce certain, somewhat strong models of the SBM, but there were some resistance. There had been from political sides as well as from the community sides. So because of that reason, and I have heard that the name was changed anyway. Program for School Improvement was the name given to it, PSI we call. In 2005, again, it was supported by the World Bank initiatives as well. The programs, actually the World Bank by that time introduced sector-wide approaches. I think Dr. Tara, madam, remembers this. It was a sector-wide approach program. It was not a project, no project mode after that, only programmatic approaches. So I would answer the questions raised on the funding modality as well. Now, from these, from mid-2000s onwards, almost all the development partner funds are also coming through the treasury. All the funding partners need to, indicate their annual budgets to the treasury, and also as a result of this programmatic lending approaches, the program for results we call, the results-based master plans were developed by the Ministry of Education, and all the funding agencies are supporting the treasury, and treasury amalgamates all these funds, and they are incorporated in the annual budget estimates of the Ministry of Education. And the budget plans are done in accordance with the education master plans by the planning divisions of the Ministry of Education. And but the funding flow for the provinces is somewhat different. That is actually the provincial council's grant goes, it's a block grant again, provincial specific development grant, which is reviewed by the Finance Commission. And the now current days, actually the funding partners like World Bank are supporting the provincial component, with the government with two components, national component and the provincial components, where for example, the World Bank's total project funding, out of that 75% goes over the 9 provinces, and then 25% sits for the benefit of the national level agencies, including the Ministry, National Institute of Education, and Department of Publications, etc. So the school improvement PSI program also is funded by both parties, the Ministry of Education as well as by the provincial councils. And as an extension to that, an augmented PSI was introduced in 2018. And gradually the thresholds under which the schools can make financial decisions were escalated, and the decision-making body is empowered with the participation of the school and community members and teachers. They together make the decisions, and school development committee is elected from the school development society, the larger body of the parents. And then this school development committee is taken part by a representative of the zonal education officer as well. So director of the zonal education office. So his representative is also there to join the decision-making process, and empowered with financial decision-making and revenue generation to a certain extent. And professional development, school-based teacher development programs are combined into this PSI program, and also learning enhancement is highlighted. And proposal was developed by the MOU on school boards in 2016, according to the government's policy guidelines. However, it was not brought into the implementation stage. There, I remember we proposed 2 models, moderate model and an advanced model. The advanced model we suggested to introduce to certain, identified schools with certain additional powers devolved. But the moderate model for the regular other schools, moderate schools, but that was not brought into the implementation level, maybe because of certain funding reasons, maybe. And NEC, the National Education Commission, also has proposed for SBM in its sessional paper back in 2002, as I remember, as well as very clearly I remember in 2003, its policy proposals. So my opinion is the existing guidelines to a greater extent, or rather supports the moderate school-based management practices. And here I am going to present, just in a nutshell, the norm-based formula funding mechanism. It was, as I mentioned earlier, it was the formula funding mechanism introduced in year 2000, and then later on, School-based learning enhancement grants were given to the schools time to time, depending on the availability of funding, using the development partner funds as well. Again, designed on a formula with certain positive discriminations towards the smaller and disadvantaged schools. And these formula, the Enbucrum formula, the earlier one, recognized 4 basic variables. Basic student allocation, that is student numbers by primary, secondary, and advanced levels, and curriculum subjects taught at different levels, and specialty, the number of students studying with who are in the school with special educational needs, that is SEN, that is the disabilities, etc., and the school site needs. Schools are, if the school is disadvantaged and resource requirements are high, then they are given some additional positive, additions. And in I am coming to the teacher recruitment as well. In Sri Lanka, teacher recruitment is based on the provisions of the minutes of the Sri Lanka Teacher Service and the 13th Amendment. Anyway, the requirements for teacher recruitments are always counted down or projected by school, and basically on attrition rates, annual attrition rates. And periodical teacher cadre reviews are also undertaken together with jointly by the Ministry of Education and the provincial councils, all the 9 provinces, especially with the provincial departments of education, in order to assess each school's subject-based teacher cadre requirement. And that is done in accordance with the circulars, which defines the norms and criteria for identification of teachers, the numbers by classrooms. And however, teacher shortages still prevail due to poor deployment in one reason, and attritions happen throughout the year, but recruitments are done at a particular given time of the year, or 2 times, twice or thrice, but until such time the school system sometimes suffers with teacher shortages. And also certain subjects like technology, advanced level sciences, actually teachers do not stay with the system. Sometimes they leave early. So because of these issues, as well as the teachers' reluctance to work in difficult circumstances, seriously influence the teacher shortages. So I am now moving on to certain suggestions. I don't know, Avijita, I am taking some time. Quickly elaborate my suggestions. Actually, these are not recommendations, but the suggestions, the opinions. In order to
we can do it in about 5 minutes, and then we'll go to the Q&A.
Yes, thank you. Adaptations of SBM principles in Sri Lanka. How we can do that? It's a crucial requirement. So I would say that a balanced control model of SBM is possible for Sri Lanka, that encourages participation and collaboration of the community and the stakeholders. And they can actually, as mentioned, they can act then in emergencies or crisis situations and in their own planning and development decision making. And that needs transferring of reasonable autonomy to schools make democratic decisions. And also that has to certify maintenance of principles of equity and quality and rights of children. And that needs to actually focus on strengthening schools as cost centers, which enables the schools to generate their own resources. And also that definitely needs to be embedded with a sound monitoring and evaluation system. And also needs to encourage professional teacher development programs, and also need to be coupled with some administrative, restructuring program. If more powers are going to go to the schools, then the roles and the responsibilities of the other layers should be amended rightly. And that needs to introduce certain, models of SBM and looking for gradual improvements. And then when it comes to school-based funding, school-based management plus school-based funding goes together. They go together, so they need to be combined in a one package, and that needs an advanced formula funding mechanism which supports with the adequate financial resource envelope to the schools annually. Maybe as Chai mentioned, it as a joint, collaborative funding mechanism of the national, provincial, plus the school generate funds. Sometimes the schools can generate funds and the government can give over a matching grant, and that annual stable school-based funding allocation should be assured in the budget estimates. And actually, once we discuss with the Treasury to set aside funding at the Treasury level and dispatch the school-based grants from the Treasury directly to the schools, but that didn't happen anyway. Sometimes in the future it may be possible. It's not possible. I mean, I wouldn't say that it is not possible. And it's linked through budget line for each school. Still, the schools are not linked with the government budget line. The latest place, I mean, at the end, the government budget line goes up only up to the zone level. So the zones only the places where they can actually even do some, reasonable level of procurement for the schools. So this needs change. And schools should be empowered with devolved power and authority for functioning as cost centers. And also definitely it needs to be embedded with a capacity development program. And when it comes to school-based teacher recruitment, actually within the current legislature, it may not be possible to enable schools to hire and fire teachers. However, as currently it happens, the NCOE-based diplomates or the graduates can be recruited by the Ministry of Education and the provincial councils on annual basis. And then sometimes if mechanisms are drawn in such a way that these teachers can be allocated on, on criteria-based allocation to different provinces, and then it goes to the allocation goes to the zones, even again on a criteria-based mechanism. And the zonal level, there can be a plan between the zonal directors and the schools of the particular zone, or I mean that can go to the cluster level also. There can be a zone level or a cluster level plan for teacher placements. So that gives, I think, that will give some sort of, opportunities for the principals, school principals, to manage their requirements, with some, matching qualified teachers. Understanding between MOE and PCs, the provincial councils, to undertake recruitment procedures parallelly at a given time and the same time of the year. So this happens currently at different times. So sometimes it makes chaos. An establishment of teachers pool at each one. We propose this thing as well with excess teachers or maybe hired teachers, enabling school management to hire with the school grants to mitigate any shortages on permanent or temporary basis, because teachers go on maternity leave and study leave. So by that time, in such occasions, schools are suffering teacher shortages, particular teachers, absence for 1 year maybe. So these kind of issues can be sorted out with a kind of a teacher pool established at each zone. And however, in order to ensure these changes happen, appropriate policies are definitely a must. So these are the suggestions that I am going to present on in front of you. So thank you very much for listening to me.